We're live. Friends, welcome to Be Wastewise, your knowledge partner in the resource revolution. I'm Ranjit Annipu. I'm a senior waste management consultant and a co-founder of Be Wastewise. Thanks for joining us on the first event in partnership with WasteAid UK. This builds on our knowledge partnerships with the International Solid Waste Association, ISWA, and the Asian Development Bank, ADB. And it also builds on our programs, Global Dialogues on Waste, which are annual, which are organized annually, and also on our Pioneers and Changemakers. Through these programs, we provide you high quality knowledge, which is easily accessible. I believe this partnership, Mike and Zoë are already here, and they'll talk to you about this partnership. But I just wanted to say that in the waste management sector, we are a baby sector compared to many other sectors, and because of which we don't have the scale to do anything globally. We don't have a global company. We don't have a global organization which encompasses everyone who are working in the waste management field. So because of this, we really cannot scale our ideas or scale our programs on the scale, because we don't have the global audience for this. And Be Wastewise is building that global audience, and we are thinking 15 to 20 years. So that's our timeline. So with that, welcome again, and Mike and Zoë will take it from here. Mike?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the first of a series of 4 WasteAid webinars delivered in partnership with Be Wastewise. You're all welcome to send us comments and questions using the chat box throughout the webinar, and it will be available on the WasteAid website and also on the Be Wastewise website afterwards, if you'd like to refer back to it or share it with your networks. First of all, who are we? Well, my name is Mike Webster.
Hello, I'm Zoe. Nice to meet you.
It's great to be here. We're from WasteAid, and just to talk about what we are looking at today. Well, first of all, we're going to talk about just who we are, so you kind of understand our angle and our kind of experience in this area. We'll look at the webinar program in a little more detail. And then we'll be thinking about, first of all, where does waste come from? In order to manage it, we need to understand it and understand what's inside it, understand where it's produced and when it's produced and how it's produced. And also, we've got to think, why does this stuff matter? Why do we need to manage our waste better? Why can't we leave it dumped anywhere and anyhow? We'll be looking at the basic principles, the ideas of reducing, recycling and recovering energy. We believe that waste can be turned into a resource and it can be made useful, but we need to make sure that we handle waste in a way that is safe and healthy for us. So we'll be looking at how to protect ourselves from hazards. And then finally, we'll be looking at how to turn waste into a resource, how to maximize value, manage what's left over, and how we can create that all-important value chain from waste. So first of all, who are we? So WasteAid has been around for 4 years, and our mission is to transform lives by sharing recycling skills with some of the world's poorest communities. We believe that within waste lies opportunity, and we also want to see our vision is a network of organizations based around the world who know and understand and care about waste, who can provide practical solutions to the waste crisis. So we work closely with partners and try to influence decision makers to ensure that waste comes up the global agenda. And this image is just from our very first project in the Gambia, right at the beginning of what was the Gambia's first waste composition analysis. We'll refer back to this later, but in order to manage waste, you need to know where it is, what it is and what's inside it and how it's produced. This toolkit also, this webinar, excuse me, builds upon a toolkit which is available at wasteaid.org.uk/toolkit. Please have a look at the website. It's freely available for anyone to download, and there are 3 key sections. First of all, why should we care about waste? And the second section is how you can prepare and get and set up a project. And finally, the third section is technical advice on a variety of simple, effective technologies for reprocessing waste and creating value. Do take a look at it. It's been downloaded so far more than 13,000 times in 160 countries. There's clearly a demand for this sort of material, and people are very excited about it. We've had some great feedback. There's also a couple of new videos with a couple of the technical approaches in there, so do take a look at that. So just going on about the 4 webinars, we've got obviously today's one, and we're just having a look at how to develop community waste management and why it matters. In July, on the 11th of July, we'll be looking at how to develop a waste business and how you can create jobs but also clean the planet. And that's not just creating jobs, but often creating jobs for some of the most marginalized. In September, on the 19th of September, we'll be looking specifically at how to develop organic waste management initiatives. And then finally in November, we'll be looking at how to manage plastics in your community, how to create simple plastics reprocessing industries, as well as the impact in improving the environment. But we have one simple message. If there's nothing else you take away from this webinar series, the one thing that we want you to think about is that if you're living in a place without a decent waste collection, you can change things. 1/4 of the world's population live without having their garbage, their waste, their rubbish picked up, and they're left to themselves to manage this material. Now, you don't have to wait for the government or someone outside to come and sort it out for you. You can take steps yourselves, okay? And we would suggest that dealing with waste is an urgent public health priority. Don't wait for someone else to come and sort it out. In the short to medium term, you can take action and you can start improving things yourself. Okay, I'm now going to hand over to Zoe.
Thank you. I've just seen a message from Ranjit come up saying, Ryan from Ghana says the toolkit is awesome. Cheers, Ryan. Glad you like it. It's always nice to get really good feedback. We have had a lot of really positive feedback. So thank you. And if you do have any other comments on the toolkit, they don't have to just be positive. Please do get in touch with us and let us know if you think there's something missing or whatever. Okay, so back to the webinar content. Mike's done a good basic introduction to WasteAid and who we are and how we tend to work. So now we're going to look at understanding waste. Where does it come from and what are the problems of uncollected waste? And please do remember to use the live chat box if you'd like to send us any comments or ask any questions. Oh, I'm using the wrong technology. Okay. So this site is from, this is an informal dump site in Guatemala, photograph taken by a colleague of ours, Timothy Baldry, a few years ago. And it's not an uncommon sight around the world. In fact, there's 2 billion people around the world with no waste collection and 3 billion people that don't have a controlled waste disposal solution. So if you're one of the people living without a decent waste management service in your community, you're absolutely not alone, okay? There are many of us, and but the good news is that you know, together we can actually improve the situation and find sensible and sustainable ways to manage our waste better. This picture was taken by Mike a few months ago when he went to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and it shows what happens when there is no waste management system in a city. So this is in Kinshasa. There's a factory in Kinshasa that's turning out, was it a million plastic bottles a month into the local market, knowing full well that there's no waste management system for dealing with
18
it.
million.
18 million, wow, okay.
And that was one of the smaller ones.
Gosh. So obviously there's a lot of problems when there's no waste collection. People often burn or dump the waste, which is totally understandable because there's no alternative. Society has developed to rely a lot on plastic. It is a wonderful material, particularly for protecting food and making sure that we can get products, for example, from the farm to the consumer safely. But the problem comes when the plastic becomes a waste because it doesn't biodegrade like a leaf. It's persistent in the environment, and so it's just accumulating and accumulating and accumulating. And I think about now, there is a kind of a social awakening about the plastic problem, that we do need to find something better to do with it other than just leaving it in the environment. Here's a picture from Somaliland. So this is the lower value plastics, the flexible plastics. Again, it can be challenging to think that we can, implement a decent program that's cost effective in a local area for dealing with very, very low value materials, but it can be done. Importantly, I think as waste managers, we know that transporting waste is the most expensive part of waste management normally. So particularly if you've just got very low value materials, you want to avoid transporting it if you can. And that means dealing with it locally, turning the material into a product for which there is a local market, so that we can reduce the transport costs, of waste management. So I'm going to move now into a bit of a workshop that we did in the Gambia last year. We asked people to come up to the board and write what the name for waste is in their language. The point is that it doesn't matter where you're from in the world. Culturally we're all pretty different, but waste is always waste, and plastic waste, for example, always behaves the same. Doesn't matter whether you're in Uganda or Colombia or Australia or anywhere. It's always going to be the same materials behaving in the same ways. So that's helpful in some regards, because at least it means that we, once we understand a technique for dealing with a particular waste material, we can replicate that technique around the world. So just to discuss for a moment the definition of waste. Waste can be defined as something that is no longer wanted or needed for its original purpose, and so the owner discards it. And at that point, when the owner has discarded it, that's when it becomes waste, and if it's not managed properly, can become a pollution problem. So if we look at any community, where does waste come from? This is a useful activity to do with community groups if you want to introduce the idea of improving waste management in your community. We can look at so what waste comes from our homes. It might be food waste, it might be old clothes, old shoes, broken furniture, this kind of thing. Farms are going to have different waste materials. Mechanics workshops, metalworking workshops, this sort of thing. Again, different waste materials coming from those. Markets are going to have a lot of food waste and typically a lot of plastic as well. And when the two are mixed together, then it's a particular problem because that's just an unhygienic mess. But if we keep the materials separate, then we've got a chance of dealing with them, turning them into something useful that people will actually pay for as a product. Okay, so looking at people's sort of mentality about waste and their behaviour. So, I think we all ultimately have to take responsibility for our own waste. And that means individually, as a community, as a whole country, and then, we get to the global scale of waste, where we're dealing with 2 billion tonnes of just normal domestic waste every year. And so it really is time that we start taking responsibility bit by bit for ourselves and our own communities, and collectively then we can make a really significant impact. Okay, so, oh, I skipped her. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that the two main ways that people deal with waste, if they don't have a proper waste management service in their area, a lot of the time people will burn waste. But we would really implore everybody not to burn waste, particularly never to burn plastics. When plastics are burnt, they give off noxious gases that can give you cancer, skin diseases, eye problems, breathing difficulties, particularly for young children. Burning waste can be very bad for their health and their development. We'll come back onto that. But I think the key message from this is just to avoid burning waste if you at all can. Then dumping waste equally causes a lot of problems, not just in your local area where the waste is dumped, but if it's dumped, for example, in a river, going back to that photograph that we saw in Kinshasa with all of the plastic bottles in the river, they might have been thrown in the river during the dry season when the riverbed is completely dry, but then when the rains come, so much waste gets washed out down the river into the oceans and so on, and causes a really big pollution problem. Other problems from dumping your waste locally include attracting vermin, providing plenty of places for mosquitoes to breed, which increases the diseases that they spread. It's hazardous, particularly for children playing or if people don't have decent footwear. Flies will land on the waste and spread disease. There's lots of, I'm just sorry, I'm just going to have a quick look at my notes here, because there's just such a large number of impacts from dumped waste. It's unsightly, it smells bad, it lowers the morale of communities, and importantly, it can block drains, which means that if there is when the rains come, if there is a flood incident, it can be really aggravated by having drains and waterways just chock full of plastic. So it is really important that we work together to find better ways to manage this material, and in so doing, we can create jobs, create a healthier environment for everybody. Okay, the health impacts of not managing waste in your area are most severely felt by children. The health impacts on children of living in areas where waste is just openly dumped or burnt are very serious. You can see them here on the screen: diarrhea, poor development, illnesses, and so on. In fact, the United Nations calculated that the cost to society of not managing waste is 5 to 10 times more than actually implementing a simple waste management system. When you look at the health impacts, the economic impacts, and the environmental impacts. Just briefly on the environmental impacts there, marine plastics has really it's been in the news here a lot over the last few months. People are finally waking up to the fact that plastic doesn't degrade like a leaf, and it is accumulating in the oceans. And in fact, some 70% of the plastics in the oceans is just normal household waste from parts of the world where there's no waste management. So this is, a fairly simple challenge to tackle in that regard. Okay, so just a brief summary of all of the impacts caused by uncollected waste: pollution of land, air, water, the oceans; the health impacts, particularly for children, the spread of disease and poor development, both mental and physical; and the economic costs, including higher risk of flooding, a loss of business and tourism, harm to livestock if they eat the plastic, the cost of cleaning areas up, and so on. So I think that in terms of sustainable development, waste management is a very, very effective way of improving the situation for a lot of people. In fact, we would go so far as to say that implementing decent waste management can actually help deliver all 17 of the Global Sustainable Development Goals. We've got an article on the WasteAid website about this if you're interested, particularly in the Sustainable Development Goals and how waste management is related to them. Okay, so I'm going to hand back to Mike.
Thanks, Zoe. So we've looked at the introduction and where waste comes from and why it matters. Now we're going to have a look at a few of the basic principles of managing your waste better. I'm sure some of you are familiar with the waste hierarchy, and this is based upon that, but it's made up of actions that we can all take, and it's hopefully a practical guide. So, of course, as waste managers, we are the only profession in the world that's trying to do ourselves out of a job. Ultimately, we'd all like to see a world without waste. But as Zoe mentioned earlier, we're a long way from that. So the most important thing we can do is obviously prevent waste and reduce our waste. So first of all, we need to think about saying no to things we don't need, avoiding single-use disposable items. A reusable item might be a bit more expensive, but in the long term, it will save us money. Repair items, can we repair those old clothes, or that's a bit of electronics that's broken, and find another use for things. We've got a picture here on the left from our friends Women's Initiative The Gambia, and they've got a whole they're very good at making a variety of things, including some shoes there made out of old bits of tire. There's lots of different things you can make out of old materials. Recycling is the idea that waste can be used as a raw material for another manufacturing process, for making into something new. And you can upcycle, which is when we transform materials into more valuable products. But we can also turn other things like plastics into new items. There's also a lot of organic waste in the waste stream that we'll find, and we can often either compost that or even recover energy from it. So can we turn organic waste into fuels, for instance? And our partners in West Africa have been busily showing communities how to turn woody waste, everything from mango leaves to coconut shells to groundnut shells to various other woody wastes into charcoal. It burns hotter than the charcoal made from traditional methods, it burns longer, and it can be burnt cheaper. But it's important to be careful, never burn plastic waste. Low temperature burning of plastic can lead to a variety of polluting and dangerous subjects. But before we talk about how we can work with waste, it's important to understand that, yes, working with waste can be dangerous. The opportunity that lies in waste is in part because many other people don't see that value themselves. They think the waste is dirty, smelly, and even dangerous. There are opportunities, but we have to be careful in how we deal with waste. Broken glass and sharp metal can cut feet and open wounds. Medical waste and needles that have been in contact with people, sick people, can transmit disease. Smoke from burning waste can harm eyes, skins, nose, throat, and so forth. So it's important to make sure that you have the right equipment, some quite simple safety equipment, when you're handling waste. Cover your face if you're going to be if you're going to be working in a dusty environment. Make sure your arms and legs are covered. It might be an overalls, it might just be some old clothes that you can use. Sturdy old trousers and sturdy long shirt sleeves can do the job. Gloves, so you don't end up cutting your hands. And sensible footwear. Think about what are you going to be dealing with. If you're dealing with wet wastes, footwear that means that your feet don't get wet. If you're going to be dealing with heat as well, make sure you're wearing heat-proof footwear. And when you're finished, make sure you wash your hands before eating or drinking. So these are a few simple steps that we've taken to make sure we're ready for working with waste. The next thing we're going to do is think how we can turn waste into a resource. Why is this important? Well, first of all, if we can divert waste from, for instance, this dump site, it will have less of an impact on the environment and the local community. But there's also an opportunity to create value from waste. And what that means is when something has value, it is no longer waste, it's a resource. Okay? And remember, you can sit there and wait for outside intervention from national or local government, and meanwhile thinking about who else can do it, or you can work together to find a better way to manage your waste and turn a problem into an opportunity. So I'm going to tell you the story of Pierre. Pierre was born in far north of Cameroon in the 1980s, and he graduated from high school in the town of Marua in far north Cameroon, and there weren't any jobs. So the day after he graduated, he went on to the dump site, started collecting plastic and thinking, what can I do with that? And over the years, first of all, he was only followed by the local school children, and here are a few of his friends helping him out. But people thought, by and large, he was a bit strange. He was a bit crazy to be working with waste. But over the years, he stuck at it. And as he grew more successful, more and more people liked his idea. He started training local children. And then over the years, the local technical college said that this is a good way to create jobs for people who don't have any other jobs. So he started running training. And he's trained more and more people across Cameroon. And increasingly, this is him showing his products to Nigerian and Cameroonian government ministers at an international trade show in Abuja in Nigeria. He's now trained hundreds, if not thousands of people across West Africa. And he doesn't only show other people how to do his recycling, and this is something we'll look at detail at a later stage, so don't worry, you'll learn about the technical details from this. It's just not something that we're talking about today. But he doesn't only train people. His job, his business, is collecting and turning waste plastic into tiles. And so this is his job, and this is how he makes his living. And yes, it's hard work. Yes, you have to stick at it. But each one of those plastic tiles that you can see in the picture has about 200 plastic bags. Think about all of the waste plastic that he's kept out of the ocean. He can sell those tiles for less than the cement competitors. We've been working with Imperial College, and we found that they're harder than Portland cement. They absorb less water, and they only take 2 hours to dry rather than 2 days for cement. Okay, so you can turn waste into wealth. But first of all, you've got to think about what's there. So I'm just going to hand over to Zoe.
Thank you. Okay, so we're about to launch into the final section of this webinar. So thank you very much for joining us and for listening to us this far in. We will be taking questions after this section, so please do send us your questions using the chat box. Okay, so be prepared. If you've decided you want to work with waste, fantastic. 4 important things that you need to think about. 1, what is in the waste? What is the supply of materials? Can you get those materials regularly? Number 2, is it better to try to recycle the materials yourself, or is there an existing market? Does somebody come round to your village or town and collect that material to take on, to a middleman and then onto the global recycling market, for example, like happens with metals in most parts of the world? Number 3, the process that you're going to be using for your recycling or processing of the waste, and what you're going to make from it. What's your product? Is there a local demand for it? And finally, how can you make the most money from your activities? Because you want it to be financially sustainable, otherwise it'll always just be a pipe dream. Okay, so looking very quickly at the materials in waste, these are the most common ones that we find: food, woody waste, paper and card, metal, plastic, and glass. And it's important to be able to identify and separate those different materials so you know exactly what you're dealing with. Number 2, do it yourself or sell it onto a market. As I said, you know, for some materials like metals, it's probably better to sell it to a middleman or broker who will then, you know, they'll give you some money for it rather than trying to do the process yourself. But with food waste, woody waste, and quite often plastics, you're probably better off working out how to recycle it into a product yourself. Okay, so looking at the process that you're going to use, this is all in the toolkit. And if you look at the different technology, the different how-to documents at the back of the toolkit, it's got all these different processes you can use for recycling waste into new products. And these are the things that you need to think about. Your cost, you need land to do your process on, probably with some hard standing and a shelter from the sun. Do you need electricity? Do you need to gain any new skills? Is there a market locally for the products that you're going to be making? And can you minimize the transport? Because that's, as I said earlier, one of the most expensive parts of waste management. Okay. And here we are about making the most money. So the way that you, I won't read through this because we're short of time, but it's basically if you want to start recycling a waste material, try to find out where it's being produced in the first place and ask those people to keep the material separate for you so it's nice and clean. Because if you're working with cleaner materials, it's not just safer and more pleasant, but you'll be able to make a higher quality product at the end. Okay. And these are all helpful tips. Just going back to that briefly, this I noticed that a couple of participants have said that they want to start their own waste management programs in their communities. So these 4 tips are really important things to think about before you start anything. Okay.
So we'll be taking questions soon. So if you'd like to write any up, please just pop them in the chat box.
Yeah. Okay, finally, managing what's left. So if you have successfully separated your waste materials and you've found recycling processes for many of them, you'll always have something left, from about 15% of the waste stream upwards, things that you just can't recycle into anything useful. So if you go to the toolkit, the final how-to guide, number 12 in the series, shows you how to locate and build a simple, safe landfill site where you can control the waste, contain it, and keep it covered so that vermin can't access it. Okay.
Thanks, Zoe. So we're just beginning to come to the end of webinar 1, and we'll be taking questions in a second. We've thought about, first of all, looked at who WasteAid is. We've thought about where the waste came from and the challenges, the problems that it causes, the public health problems it causes. We've thought about the 3 R's and how to keep ourselves safe. And then Zoe's just been talking about how to maximize value. We'll be looking at in detail how to grow your recycling business in July, and then in September, how to grow your organic waste management initiative, looking at some of the technical aspects of working with organic waste, and then the technical aspects of working with plastic in November. Just a reminder, this is all based on the Making Waste Work toolkit, which is at wasteaid.org.uk/toolkit, all free to download. Please have a look and let us know if you've got any further queries. So I'm just drawing to the end of the webinar now, so we'd just like to thank you for listening. I understand we've got about 90 people listening from across the world, so it's been a really good turnout. Thank you very much. The webinar will be available on Be Wastewise website and also the WasteAid website as well. And we'd just like to leave you with that thought that together we can really make lasting change with this. Waste is something that's been neglected for too long. We can't just sit around and wait for the powers that be to come and help us. We really have to take action ourselves. You can follow us on Twitter at WasteAid UK, drop us a line at info@wasteaid.org.uk, or have a look at the website at wasteaid.org.uk. Thanks a lot for listening. I'm Mike Webster.
And I'm Zoë Lenkiewicz, so thank you.
And we look forward to your questions.
Okay, so we've actually got some questions coming here. One from Teresa. As you turn plastic waste to energy, how do you ensure there is no release of UPOPs, which are gases? Okay, we are not using plastic to make energy. We never ever promote the burning of plastics because it does release harmful gases that are bad for your health. So the processes that we do with plastics are, it does involve melting the plastic but never burning it. And that's why it's really important to learn how to separate your plastics. And if you go to the toolkit, I think it's How To Guide 6 or 7 is called Selling Plastics, but it teaches you how to identify the different plastics because they all melt and burn at different temperatures. So you just want to be dealing with one kind of plastic at a time, and then you can keep your process nice and safe. So just to repeat, we don't, please don't burn plastic.
I'm just having a look at some of the other.
The name of our partner handling the energy recovery, the charcoal briquettes were made by Women's Initiative, the Gambia.
They are great trainers. We've we've had the director gone across to Ghana before to train people there, and she's fantastic. There's a really good how-to video online that that's recently gone up, so please take a look at that as well.
Yeah, if you go to YouTube and type in WasteAid, you'll find how-to videos for making these plastic paving tiles that you can see on the screen now, and the charcoal briquettes. Okay, next question. What is the initial investment needed for community waste management?
You can, for instance, depends on what you're doing, depends on the scale. It is, for instance, with the briquetting, we choose a mold that costs about $2. With briquetting, for instance, you can spend anything from $2 up to $1 million on a briquetting machine. Our advice is to start small. When you have the problem, and I call it's a good sort of problem where you can't keep up with demand, then you can start investing in increasing your capacity. But start small, see how things go on, perfect your product, because remember, actually at the end of the day, it's about producing a really good quality product. You're not dealing with waste, you're dealing with a raw material that you want to turn into something, and you want to turn it into something that's better than the products that are out there at the moment. So make sure you've got that to the stage, and then you can start thinking about upscaling. Sometimes we see challenges where people try to upscale too quickly, but don't. Start small and then build.
Yeah, okay, so thanks. That was in answer to Sam's question. Then we have another question here from Amarachi. Do you have a sample business plan template for community recycling business? Yes, we do. If you go to the toolkit and have a look, it's in part B. There's a sample business plan for making the charcoal briquettes, and we used the real data and the real costs that the Women's Initiative, the Gambia, experience when they're making the charcoal briquettes and selling them. Sorry, somebody's also said that the diagram is not clear. Sorry about that. If you, again, all of the diagrams have come from the toolkit, so I would encourage you to have a look at that if you haven't seen it already. It's available in kind of A4, for print, and also in mobile phone versions, so whichever is more convenient for you.
Just going to scroll up here just to see if there's any more pictures at the top. We have people saying they want to start their own waste management programs in their communities. What are some general tips? Well, hopefully the webinar was full of lots of general tips, but the key thing I'd say is understand your waste, understand what's in there, how much it's produced, when it's produced, because waste is seasonal. Sometimes there's more food waste, sometimes there's more plastic. Understand what the end markets are. In West Africa, for instance, there's a strong demand for charcoal, so perhaps biofuels from woody waste is an opportunity. In India, for instance, there seems to be less of a market for charcoal in various parts of India because people use gas, okay, as a cooking fuel. So understand what's in the waste, understand your own markets, but it's all about the knowledge and understanding. Make sure you really understand what's there, what people want to buy, before you start making an investment of your time or money in particular equipment.
Okay, next question. How long will a developing country's economy take to transform from linear to circular economy? Well, I think that's the million-dollar question. I don't know any country in the world that has a circular economy yet. It's an idea, and people all over the world, whether you're in a wealthy country or a poorer country, people are being creative with waste and identifying opportunities to create examples of circular economy wherever they live. So I would just say stay motivated, allow yourself to be informed and inspired by what other people around the world are doing, and maybe you can, if you try different processes, some will work better where you live and some not so, but it's just trial and error, and to stay with that.
Can I just, just to add to that, I mean, waste is hugely a neglected issue. Only 0.3% of development aid goes on waste. A quarter of the world's population don't have their waste collected, so clearly the traditional approaches have failed or are massively incomplete. Meanwhile, the evidence around the public health impacts, whether it's from air pollution, whether it's from marine plastics in the sea, people are just beginning to understand the scale of this issue. So it's, we want more people talking about waste, and certainly the first part of the toolkit is a plead. It's just saying to people that waste matters. You can't grow now, clean up later. There's a direct linkage, and the reason that we focus on public health is that it shows it in a global development context. Kids that grow up in dirty environments won't end up being, or are less likely to grow up being, the doctors, the nurses, the teachers that their country so desperately needs to develop. So it's not an option, it's an absolute basis of development.
Okay, next question. Tim, there's a lot to be said for creating new plastic products, and not to downplay these efforts, but have you considered the unintended consequences of plastic road tiles, such as microplastic release into the sea, or what happens to the tiles at the end of their life? Okay, yes, good question, Tim. It's an important question. I think that what we need to remember at this juncture is that the plastic that is ending up in these paving tiles would otherwise have just been burnt or dumped. Okay, so it's all a hierarchy. So, nothing in this world is perfect, and there may well be some tiny leakage of microplastics from the tiles, for example, if they've got heavy traffic going over them, that sort of thing. But compared to the problem that they are solving, I think that the risks are very minimal. I'm also going to answer Teresa from Kenya, who says, thank you so much for the webinar. When is the next webinar? We need more on this. Cheers, Teresa. I think we're just going to pop back to the previous
so we can remember
slide.
When it is. It's on the 11th of July. So there's the next, hopefully you can see that all. That's the next webinar, and the ones after that.
Okay, and then we've got a few questions here asking when we'll be coming to Ghana to set up a waste enterprise.
We'd love to be there. The sooner the better.
Do you know some financial support to start a community waste management plan?
It is one, we were set up, WasteAid was set up because this is a massive issue and no one was talking about it, therefore no one's funding it. So one of our key jobs is to spend a lot of time, and certainly we talk to the UK government and other donors about why waste matters. So hopefully one of the results of this, and it seems like the juggernaut is slowly beginning to move, is that there will be more funding for waste and for waste's sake, and also in a new and innovative way. As I said, with a quarter of the world's population not even having their garbage picked up, there is clearly something failing about, first of all, the scale, how much money we're spending on waste, and secondly, the way that we're doing it. Top-down approaches are clearly not working, and not working for large parts of the population in many parts of the world. So it's important to have new approaches.
Okay, we've nearly run out of time, so I will just say, Amarachi, we are happy to talk to, for different collaborations in Nigeria, of course, all over the world. Yes, send us an email. Timoteo, are all types of plastics applicable? Not all, but many of them are. So do have a look at the toolkit. In the how-to guides, it teaches you how to separate the plastics, and then to make the plastic paving tiles. The best plastics that we've worked with are LDPE, which is stretchy and you can scratch it with your fingernail like a plastic bag.
The low quality plastic bags, the black plastic bags.
And HDPE is also
the gallon holders for bidons and gallons.
Okay, Sam, last question then, and thank you for all your questions. Sam, what is your take on capacity building and training related interventions?
Everything. So I mean, that is our approach. We are not interested in coming and sorting out waste management. We're interested in finding local partners and working with them to find locally appropriate solutions. Our action on waste, that they can advocate with their government, so saying, look, you've got to do something more about this, can actually sit there and provide practical solutions. So when they need to run a local training, they can do it in a locally appropriate way and can actually be demonstrating how this happens to people within their communities, and also doing it in a way that is much more locally appropriate. So yes, we're all about and
that's also why we're here partnering with WasteWise, which again was also set up to facilitate knowledge dissemination and training around the world for people that want to work in waste management. So we have the perfect partner in WasteWise, and we are continuing to develop our own training materials. And when we partner with groups in different countries, our step number one is always training trainers, so that when we leave, the knowledge continues to be spread and disseminated.
So yeah, thank you very much for listening. Have a look at the toolkit. That's the website address for it, wasteaid.org.uk/toolkit. If you have any queries, please email us at info@wasteaid.org.uk. Follow us on Twitter at WasteAidUK, and have a look at the website at wasteaid.org.uk. And we're also on Facebook and LinkedIn, WasteAid UK. Thanks a lot, and have a great day and afternoon and morning wherever you are in the world, and night. Thank you very much, particularly Mr. Night.
We'll see you at the next webinar, I hope. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye. Well done. Bye.